Hey everybody, Jane here, and today we are doing a review on the book Cujo by Stephen King. I did consume this book as an audio, and I will say I felt like that was the way to go because, man, this book is long. I am going to try to stay out of too much spoiler territory. However, this is an older book and there's a couple things that I do want to go into that technically may be slightly spoilery, but I feel like not a lot. So Cujo is about, well, it's technically, I guess, about a rabid dog. I went into it thinking it was about a mother and son who are trapped with a rabid dog, and that is fairly accurate. However, it took so long to get to the mother and son being trapped with the rabid dog that I almost feel bad mentioning that they get trapped with the rabid dog because that feels like a spoiler. As I said, I listened to the audiobook, and I listened to the audiobook while I was traveling from Ohio to Tennessee to visit my brother. And I kid you not, I was down in Tennessee before the mom and son got trapped. It took forever for these people to get out with the rabid dog. And I was really kind of irritated because I'm like, this is what I wanted in the story. This is the part of the story I wanted. And it took you hours into this. It's a 14-hour audiobook, a 14-plus hour audiobook. It took you forever to get us into the place, into the dog and the mom and son. So, but that is basically what Cujo is about, is a rabid dog. Now, this book, I gave a rating of 3.5 out of 5. I had a really hard time reading this. I felt like this book was above average in many ways, but I also felt frustrated with so many elements of this book. And one of the things that I noticed is the things that I thought it did well, it almost did too much of. So there were things that I thought were really interesting, but that I wished they would have not taken as extreme as they did. So I'm going to go with those things first that I thought the book did really well. I thought the book did an amazing job with Cujo himself. Cujo is the rabid dog. We meet him before he has rabies. He is a sympathetic character, and throughout the entire book we are reminded that Cujo is not a bad dog. This is not some flaw in him. He is rabid and he is sick, and he is not really the villain of the piece. Rabies is the villain of the piece that is making him sick. And I really loved that was reminded throughout the book, that Cujo is not the bad guy of the story. He is a victim of circumstance just as much as everybody else is. And I think that was, of all the things that I can speak highly of this book, I can absolutely say that was the best done part of the book and something that I totally appreciated. I am a dog lover, and I really loved how Cujo was portrayed. We do get his point of view a few times, and he is just shown very sympathetically for being the, quote, villain of the piece. It makes the whole thing much more tragic rather than horrific. It's horrific for Cujo, too. So I did really appreciate the way Cujo was treated. I also appreciated that the characters in this book were well developed. Everybody, and this is kind of the downside of that, everybody had a story. And I did feel like sometimes that was a problem, but I also, on the other hand, liked that the characters were fleshed out. Sometimes in horror stories and horror books, the characters aren't really delved into that much. Their personal life is not as interesting or as important as the monsters that they're fighting and the thrillery situations they're into. Whereas in this book, there's a lot of discussion about a lot of topics, including one that, while I didn't love that they took so much time with this character, I was interested in her situation, and that was one of the characters has a past growing up in poverty in Maine. And I never considered what that is like, and how poverty in Maine looks like poverty everywhere else. And Maine just seems like such a place with bright and natural resources and well-off people. Like, I think of wealthy people in Maine. I don't think of Maine having the same issues with poverty that, for instance, Appalachia does. I live in Ohio, so we're right there in Appalachia. And so poverty is like part of our history and part of, it's like, I get that. But Maine is not a place that I think of when I think of poverty. So to see this aspect of poverty in a character, not only in her past and how it's influenced her to her present, but also in her present, that was interesting. But at the same time, she was one of those characters that I kind of felt like, why did we have so much focus on her when the focus should really kind of be on mom and kid trapped with dog? Like, that is what I wanted when I picked up this book, mom and kid trapped with dog. And there's so much more in the book that sometimes I got frustrated because I just wanted mom and kid trapped with dog. So again, I loved that so much was explored and that so many characters were explored so deeply, but especially Cujo. But I felt like sometimes it was taken too far and just used to drag things out. A similar instance would be, there is a character who only appears one time in the story to deliver some information. And as we are seeing him, so he can deliver this little tidbit of information to us, he's talking about his bowel issues, or he has problems with farting, and he's worried he's got cancer because he's farting so much. And it just blew my mind that we're having to meet this guy who is not going to play a very important role in the story. He is just coming basically on stage to deliver some information, and we're hearing about his concerns about a possible cancer diagnosis because he has excessive flatulence. So I felt like, again, that's where it was taken too far. I loved that we got to see Cujo get sick. I loved that the main characters were well developed, but then you have these side characters who are just there to deliver this piece of information, and I have to find out that they think they have cancer because they have excessive flatulence. So I felt like when it was done well, but it also at times got excessive. And there was so many characters, unnecessarily at times. And there were occasionally scenes that I felt like weren't entirely necessary. The dad of the story is called away on some issues with his work, which is why the mom and the son end up trapped in the car with the dad not realizing that there is a problem in coming and rescuing them. And I realized that they had to get the dad out of the way, but at the same time, so much was focused on this thing that had happened at work. And I didn't necessarily think that was necessary. I did recently watch the movie version of Cujo. I'm going to be doing a book versus movie comparison. And one of the things I liked about the way the movie presented the work problem was it just was like, there was a newscast saying, hey, this thing happened. And the dad going, oh crap, that's bad for business. We've got to go handle that. Whereas in the book, it really took up quite a bit of time of, you had a whole scene showing what had happened that they're responding to. And then quite a bit of the lead up of the dad and how important this account was. And again, in some ways I get it, but in some ways I felt like it detracted from what I wanted. I wanted killer dog. So I think overall I felt like Cujo could have been a 8-hour audiobook instead of a 15 or 14 plus hour audiobook. I felt like there was a lot of stuff in there that didn't necessarily need to be in there. I loved that King did not shy away from things. The death scenes were amazing, where the dog kills people. I was all for that. I thought those were very well done. I thought the ending was well done, and I loved that King made the choices he made that were not what I was expecting, and that he didn't shy away from things that could have been shied away from. King never pulls the camera back. He always is right there when the action is happening, describing it, and I really loved that about this book. On the other hand, though, I felt at times there were things thrown in for the sake of vulgarity that didn't necessarily need to be there. So again, I loved that he didn't pull back the camera on vital moments, like during the death scenes. I loved the death scenes. I thought they were well done, but there were other times that stuff that was vulgar was just unnecessarily thrown all around. And I did feel uncomfortable with that sometimes. If you've been following my channel, you know that me and vulgarity have a complex relationship. Well done vulgarity doesn't bother me. Vulgarity for the sake of vulgarity sometimes does. And there were several times that I cringed during this book when things were said or words were used, and I just was thinking that really wasn't necessary. Like, there were times that it was. There is a really interesting scene between Donna and a man early in the story, and he gives us a real a mental picture of the stuff that had occurred between them. And man, it was poignant. It needed to be there. I liked it. But then later we find out things about, for instance, his bed that I felt were details I didn't really need about this guy. And you could have cut hours out of the book if you just didn't give me details about this guy's disgusting bed and, the other guy's flatulence. Again, just the vulgarity that added to the book and the times that the lens wasn't pulled away versus shock value. I'm going to use the word scrotum in a book. I guess that's what I have to say about the content wise. I did, again, like the ending. I thought it was well done. But, and it had the shock value. There was, bad things happen. And I liked that. I liked that, Cujo wasn't a rabid dog who terrorized things, but nobody died. So I did appreciate how the book ended and that he didn't shy away from that. One thing also when it comes to, though, the added stuff in the book that I didn't really think needed to be there / I didn't get. In the beginning of the book, we are introduced to the fact that years before there had been a murder in this town, or a series of murders, and you kind of get the impression that there's this bad, evil force still in town, and that's what's causing this bad stuff to happen. You have the little boy who gets stuck with his mother. You have him having bad dreams and this monster in his closet that he thinks is a monster, but there's some debate if it's really a monster. When you open it, it's a stack of blankets and a teddy bear that has reflective eyes. And I just didn't really understand the point of that. Cujo is a dog that got rabies, and I don't know if they're saying like the evil from these murders somehow made the dog get rabies. I kind of missed out why we had to know about the fact that there was these murders and all the creepy stuff that happened. Also, there's a lot of dream sequences in this book. People kind of having premonitions, but not really knowing what it means. The dad who is away on a business trip, he has a dream that something is wrong, and that influences him to call home. We also have just, Tad and his concerns with these monsters. And I sometimes didn't feel like it added a lot to the story to have those things in there. Those were places that I was kind of like, King, I don't know where you're trying to take me, but I feel like I'm getting lost in that. And the payoff at the end didn't really make me feel like this murder that had been committed and the evil from it didn't feel like it had much influence on the current case. The only real tie-in is we meet a detective at one point in the book who was involved in investigating the murders that had taken place earlier. But it seemed like it was going to be significant in the beginning of the book, and at the end it wasn't. I can say I am not a huge Stephen King fan. His stuff is kind of hit or miss for me. This one, like I said, I could see that it was well done. I could see that there were parts of it that really stood out and that I really liked. And so I couldn't give it really a 3, which for me, a 3 is, it's okay. It did the things fine, but it didn't do anything special. I do think this is a special book. I don't read a lot of horror, but I do think I could see why Stephen King is the master of horror. I can see what he did in the genre, and I appreciated that. On the other hand, it just seemed like it dragged on and on at times. And so I didn't love many aspects of it. When it was good, it was so good. But when it wasn't good, it was just dragging. Like I said, the whole time I was driving from Ohio to Tennessee, they're not even in the car with the dog yet. And that's what I thought this book was about when I picked it up, is a mom and her son trapped with the dog. This is a 15-hour, 14 to 15, I don't know exactly, but 15-hour audiobook that is, the plot line is kind of rabid dog, people get trapped with rabid dog and are trying to fight him off. But there's all these side stories, and if you're not into those side stories, this book can feel really tedious, and at times it did. I didn't necessarily like the mom's side story and some of the things that had happened with her. Cujo's mom, the owner of Cujo, is a boy named Brett, and he's 10, and his mom is, I think her name is Caroline. I got why they put it in there, and her story was interesting, but at the same time, I didn't feel like it added to the rabid dog story. I felt like her story was off somewhere else. And at times, I felt like I was just seeing pieces of a puzzle of the writer being like, I need to get people out of the way so that I can trap the mom and the son with the dog. Like, I felt that. It almost felt like you could see the seams and the cracks sometimes. Like, I'm doing this thing so that the mom and the son are trapped with the dog. And then I'm going to give you a whole storyline about it because I don't want you to see that I did this because the mom and the son are trapped with the dog. So I had really mixed feelings about this book. I haven't read a ton of King. I read Misery, which I did enjoy, though it's been years. Pet Sematary, which I did enjoy, though it's been years. Green Mile, which I absolutely loved. Shawshank, which I liked, but if I recall, I liked the movie a little bit better. I read one I believe was called Blaze, and I didn't really like that. I also believe I read The Secret Window and had mixed feelings about that. So now I've read Cujo. I do think I would like to read more King just to understand why he does what he does and what works. Because here's the thing, King, like Christie, who's another author I've been doing a lot of reading of recently, these are masters in their genre. And I'm surprised how I don't always love what they're doing. And in some ways, as a writer, it gives me hope because it's like, okay, so even though they're not perfect and their books are not perfect, they are still names that are going to live on for, Christie has been dead for, I think, 30 years, and we're still reading her books. Stephen King, he is going to be the master of horror for a long time. And yet, his books are far from perfect as well. So it is nice on a writer's standpoint to be like, you don't have to be a perfect writer in order to influence your genre and to be an important storyteller. But at the same time, I'm really surprised by how much I have not loved either of these two very hyped authors. But like I said, I will be trying some other King and see maybe if some other things jive with me a little bit more. If you have any recommendations for King books, that you think I will really enjoy. I have heard The Shining is a good one, so that'll probably be the next one I do. So if you have recommendations, though, for Stephen King that are really good, like his top-notch stuff, the stuff that will make me a King fan, please put those recommendations in the comments below. If you've read Cujo and would like to comment about my thoughts on it, feel free to put those in those comments below as well. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And also, my social media is below if you'd like to contact me off of YouTube. Down in that social media are links to my books. I'm a romance author. I'm going to be branching out in the next year, hopefully, to some other genres as well. But at the moment, I'm a romance author. My books are available basically everywhere. However, if you are a member of Kindle Unlimited, you can read my most recent books for free through that program. I also have several books on Audible that are in the romance package. So if you are in the Audible romance package, you can also try out my books for free. This has been Jane. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.